Do you have the rough idea of a cost of one of these subs?
Well, the final two Astute stubs, which are the current attack submarines that are Achilles and, I can't even say it, Agamemnon. I'm glad I'm not on that boat, I couldn't spell it. It will roughly top out about £2 billion a unit. So you could start, if I was fast, I mean, remember these extra four, because the previous government had promised, well, had talked about committing to up to 8 submarines. So the extra 4, you could argue, will come in about 2045. So
2045?
Yeah, because if you remember,
you'll have to be back in work by then.
I may be under the ground at the time, but I think yeah. I mean, Boris Johnson with President Biden and the Australian Albanese Prime Minister announced AUKUS way back, and we committed to, I think it was £3 billion then to start the process. The Navy's requirement as far back as then was we want 12 submarines. That was what we call the requirement. And the Treasury kept saying, well, you've got 7, so you can have 8, of old. That's the type of relationship we have with the Treasury. So, if you were to ask the Labour government right now, can you guarantee that you will build boats 9 to 12? Has the Treasury signed it off now? Will you place a contract for it now? The answer will be no. It's a total aspiration. And it's probably what they're using quite a lot of the words at the moment, number 10, an ambition.
They are. OK, how will yesterday's review be perceived in the Kremlin and by other potential enemies?
Well, they'll be very frightened by a submarine produced in 2045 to 2050. I'm sure even Putin, with all his extra work and health conditions, I'm not sure he might get that far. What they'll see is lots of language, lots of potentially good directions of travel. Some of them started, or a lot of them started actually under the last Conservative government. So the right, but then they'll also look at the money, right? I mean, Putin will know more than anyone how much war is costing, and he will say two things: that the West aren't serious because they're not really spending the money, and secondly, what we see sadly in Ukraine is the West isn't serious because it doesn't want to put people in harm's way, and young people are not joining their armed forces. So he'll look at that, and he'll look at the debate about, hang on, I mean, you can't imagine conversations in the Kremlin where they say, no, it's an ambition. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, not that I have any faith in Russian media, but they will realise that what's happened is that John Healey tried his best but didn't get the settlement from Rachel Reeves, certainly in this real parliament, to do it. They've had to now resort to spin and claiming other people's policies. And that's a regret, because I think when, you and I know that when I was in the job, I wasn't very popular with the Treasury. I wasn't very popular with Number 10. They would often send out other ministers to try and make me reverse something. Yeah. But we tried to be at least more transparent. I would admit that the last Conservative governments and Labour governments hollowed out defence, and we had to start from a position of transparency. We're busy resorting back to this government spin and sugarcoating and evasion. I mean, when you start doing these things, the people who know that's not true are the men and women of the armed forces. They'll know it.
Where should we be as regards a percentage? Donald Trump would like to see us at 5. Mark Rutte from NATO thinks 3.5. We're struggling to get, can't even say we'll get to 3. Where should we be?
We should be 3% of GDP by 30. That means by 2030 you would be spending approximately £98 billion on defence compared to the 57 we spend now. You need a path to get there, because that's sustainable. And when you the best thing Rachel Reeves or the government could have done yesterday is set out a very clear path of spending for the next 10 years. And while I know they may not be the next government, when you do that, people make better procurement decisions. They make better decisions in how they're going to configure their force. And this review, which, I know from the beginning, the Treasury said you're not to go above 2.5, right? So it was a Treasury-led review, in a sense. Every time the review team did a review, part of the review that went way above it, the Treasury sort of interfered. So it was Treasury-led, not threat-led. And ultimately, if we want to deliver what the review recommends, some of those things are ongoing commitments already from my time in government, then we're going to have to spend 3% by 30.
Let's look at some of the decisions that were made yesterday, Sir Ben. A new cyber commander, AI, drones, fighter jets, possible reserve force. Broadly speaking, the right measures?
Right direction. I can go through all of them because the action points are listed. All of them but one were under our government. So the £6 billion for munitions was the complex munition partnership with MBDA, the missile manufacturer, that was set out in 2024. The 15 billion for the warhead, the nuclear capability. That was started under me because we had to replace the Trident warhead for the new generation. We also had to modernize or upgrade the existing warhead. That was started under me, and you don't stop it. It was a committed funding line. That's already there. The National Cyber Force, jointly with GCHQ and Cyber. We didn't have a cyber command, but nevertheless we had a commander that was an NCF commander. That was all started under us. So there's quite a lot in that list that I totally agree with because it was our policies, and I'm delighted. But I think, we need a little bit. The good thing in this review that I think is an extra thing is the National Armaments Director, which I think is an idea about trying to improve procurement, where from the centre of the department, the strategic headquarters, there is an effort to make sure that we procure better. The challenge will be whether the Treasury stops interfering in the Cabinet Office that often inserted unnecessary delays and actually extra costs. And the Treasury, believe it or not, the British Treasury, often used to force an assumption that buying British was more expensive.
Someone you'll know well, former head of the army, Lord Dannatt, is fairly critical. He likes the general direction of travel. He's very concerned about the timing. He's saying it's almost like asking Hitler to wait until 1946. Again, broadly speaking, is Lord Dannatt on the money here?
He's on the money. I mean, the fundamentals, if we wanted to match this and deliver this review properly, they should have come out with a proper pathway to the money. And as you saw in the Daily Telegraph yesterday, the authors of the review, as strong as possible, basically said, without 3%, this isn't going to work. All defence reviews, Grant Shapps and I were talking about this yesterday, all the defence reviews often start off funded and then end up towards the end hollowed because of cost growths, bad planning, bad estimates, or indeed the threat changes. This is in danger, this review, of being hollow at birth.
Lastly, the idea of these military gap years. I don't know if you heard about this. This is for 18-year-olds to do a taste of military life with a gap year in the Army, the Royal Navy or the RAF, a sort of military college, as it were. I remind listeners, you served as an officer in the British Army. Has that idea got merit?
Yeah, I think it has. I mean, I actually started in the Army as a trooper in the Scots Dragoon Guards at 18 on a sort of pre-officery course up in Catterick, and I absolutely think it's important. And yeah, anything like that, anything that engages young people of today in having...
How would you sell the military to an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old listening now?
It gave me and my fellow soldiers in my regiment, the Scots Guards, unbelievable opportunities. It taught us to grow up in lots of places. It helped us live with life. It helped us to learn different people from different backgrounds. It helped us to be strong and also recognise our own failings. One of the most important lessons I think from the army I learnt was there's always someone bigger than you. So if you think you're going to throw your weight around, one day you'll get found out. But also, everyone's scared of something. And when you all realise that as a collective group of people, you actually manage to produce a much better unit, and young men get all sorts of opportunities. In my day, it was mainly young men. But I wouldn't miss it for the world, and I would hope young people listening to this, of whatever colour or age or gender, that they realise that they should join our armed forces, try it for a year, and if this is about trying it and seeing it, then absolutely brilliant. It's not for everyone, but I absolutely would recommend it all the way.